Good morning, everyone. We're letting people in. It's just a little bit after 10. We had a few small technical difficulties with State Representative Bill Beck, and he was having trouble getting on. But he's on now. Bill, good morning. How you doing this morning?
Good morning, Jim. I'm great. It's been a great week. I've had the opportunity to see you several times this week.
It has been a good week, hasn't it?
It has. It's the kissing babies and cutting ribbons part of our job.
That's right.
Always a lot of fun.
Well, I've seen you many, many times this week, and it's been a pleasure. It is a beautiful Saturday morning in Nashville. I went running this morning, Bill. It took me several hours to run from one door to the next, but I got it and cleaned up here this morning. It was, I mean, I thought it was like 70 or something when I went out there, and but it was, maybe it was just humid. It was really sticky, and so I'm gonna rest the rest of the day. I don't know if I can do it.
You've already done your quota for the day?
I have done my exercise, and that counts for a lot. So but I know that we have Justin Wilson is on this call this morning.
Oh, one of my heroes there.
The Comptroller Emeritus, Justin Wilson, is on the phone. We've actually interviewed him before.
Really? I'm sorry I missed that.
Well, you can go back and watch on YouTube. He had less technical difficulties than you did. But of course, he had like 15 people around him trying to help.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And we will recognize any other elected officials or anything that gets on. While we'll give it a couple more minutes just to get everybody settled. But we did have a pretty busy week. There are a lot of judges that are either stepping down and retiring, or we have a bunch of new judges that are being sworn in. So this is that week, this past week and next week. There are lots of activities going on around the courthouse. And then there was also a ribbon cutting that I saw Representative Beck at. And that was up in your district, and it was a pretty amazing thing. Why don't you tell everybody about it, and then we'll start the actual program.
Oh, I'd be happy to. It is a pretty amazing thing. It was, Jim, this project was recommended in an MDHA study back in the mid-90s. And the community was very supportive. It came out of a study about there's a strip of commercial that we call the Village in Madison, and it was to aid the commercial development in that district, and also be an important thoroughfare for transportation. So in 1997, Ron Nollner was the councilman, and he proposed it. Mayor Bill Purcell put it in his spending plan. They had not gotten all the easements at that point. The easements, especially with Madison Square, were very difficult to get, and not necessarily because of the owner's fault. It had layers and layers of mortgages, and you had to get all the mortgages to release that particular easement. It's as you very well know, it's very complicated.
Sure.
It's just not as easy as people think it is, and there wasn't any condemnation or anything. So, but during that process, administrations changed, council person changed, and the next council person thought that the money should be spent on down the bend. So he took the money from what was called then the Neely's Bend extension, and moved it on down Neely's Bend for some other projects. So fast forward, Nancy Van Rees is elected, and she takes it as one of her major projects for her district. And we get Megan Berry to put it in her spending plan. And lo and behold, we just cut the ribbon this week. So it was and it's an amazing, like I said at the opening, you never think a street can be art. Well, this street to me is art. It's beautiful, it's functional, It, you know, it has, it's a, what do y'all call it? Metro, a complete street?
A complete street. Yeah.
Complete street with biking and walking and just lanes to help keep the speed down of the motorist. It's just an amazing street. If anybody gets a chance, just go out Gallatin Road, hang a left between Hardee's and Bojangles, and you're on the new Madison station, and it goes directly into the Madison 50 forward Madison station. So it's just it's a great place.
So a lot of people may not know, and I'm glad you explained how to get to it, because it's a beautiful street. And I know it's taken, 25 years for it to be pulled off, but it finally got done. It looks great. And my guess is there's going to be more things happening around it. I know there was a meeting that night to talk about maybe a park across the street or a development of a park. There's lots of green space around it. And I think it's going to be a really, really good thing for Madison for many years to come. So
it really is, Jim. And that night, the mayor came to the nighttime community meeting, and it was all about what they're going to do with. I don't know if you noticed on the roundabout, one of the legs that shoots off into the Madison Square area, and they're going to start building affordable housing and other great developments on that site. So we're very, very excited about the the development that this one road can spur.
Well, very exciting. All right, so we'll start our actual program. Again, welcome everybody. Our guest today is State Representative Bill Beck, who is State Representative for the 51st District in the House. Representing, well, in a minute, I'll let you kind of explain what your district is. But we do have Justin Wilson on the call, our former comptroller. He's now our comptroller emeritus. And I believe he did ask a question over the week, and that is, why is he so much better looking than you are? I don't know if you want to answer that, but.
Well, he's better looking than 99% of the legislators and the people at the Capitol. So, you know, it's just one of those rules of nature that he's able to shine while the rest of us are a little dull.
Well, I know. I don't know what it is. I don't know how he does it, but I don't think I really want to know. So let's go on with the rest of the program.
And Jim, he's an amazing singer. When he was, and I guess he'll continue it now that he's emeritus, but while he's comptroller, he always called each legislator and sang happy birthday to him, and did a fantastic job, I might add.
All right, I don't celebrate birthdays anymore, so maybe I don't have. All right. So Representative Beck, the first question we ask of all our guests on this show is, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you were born, what have you been doing all your life? How did you eventually become a state representative?
I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, at the old St. Thomas Hospital, and I grew up in Madison on Walton Lane. Back those days, it was a farm. That was one of my first introductions to politics. The farm Walton Lane, which runs beside the old Kmart, which is now the East Side Bowl, in between the federal cemetery there was no city water. And my dad decided that he was going to run for council to bring city water up Walton Lane. You know, that just shows that all politics is local, doesn't it? Yeah. And he ran against Doc Adams. Don't know if you remember him or not. He was a very famous councilman out this way for many years, and he was a dentist. From his office was there on Gallatin Road, and Dad ran against. It was a three-way race, and Dad came in second. But lo and behold, even though he lost the council race, he got water down Walton Lane, which was the ultimate goal. So in the end, it all worked out. And my dad just loved politics, loved helping government officials and helping the government process. So my whole life I learned about it. At the age of 12, he had me out working for a gubernatorial candidate, poll working. So it was something that I learned at an early age and have always enjoyed. I went on to attend the University School of Nashville for high school, and then Belmont College, and then Nashville School of Law, and have practiced. And my mom went to law school with me, Jim. When I decided to go to law school, she sold her insurance agency and went to law school with me, which at first was kind of embarrassing to have your mother in your same law school class. But it turned out just to be one of the greatest things ever.
And who got better grades, you or your mom?
Oh, my mother. Oh, she was a former English teacher, Jim. So she was just she taught at Maplewood High School. And when she got pregnant with my sister, in those days, they wouldn't let you show. They made you quit before you started showing. So they made her quit, and then she went on to work with my dad and Beck Real Estate, and then her own insurance agency, and then later practiced with me. So it's always been a family affair.
That's amazing. So I didn't know your mother had gone to law school with you.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have like a study group and you would study with her, or did she go, I don't want to share my notes with you?
We had an amazing study group, and she was in my study group. This is my life in law school. My mother sat on the front row with all the studious people, took impeccable notes. I sat on the back row and socialized, and it just turned out to be a great thing. And then in law school, in my experience, the study group means everything, because law is not always black and white, as you know. So it helps so much to have a roundtable discussion on everything that we did and studied.
Knowing you, it doesn't surprise me you sat on the back row and were part of that social group. So, well, let me ask you this. All right, so you practice in law. You've been in the Madison area for a while. Why did you decide to run for state representative?
Well, every man needs a hobby, right? So my hobby had always been politics. I'd always helped out councilmen and state races, and always just so enjoyed working for other people in politics. And the gentleman who had held my seat before announced his retirement about 60 days before the deadline to file, and we were going to run a local councilman for the position. And then at the last minute, he decided to back out, and because of some family issues. And he looked at me and he said, "Bill, why don't you run?" And I said, "I think I will." And then the rest is history.
That's all it took, was him asking you to run, and you go, "I think I will." Hey, Bill.
He wasn't able to run, so I took the mantle.
Do you think you want to run for president? Why don't you run for president?
That's good, Jim. Real good.
Well, I mean, it took you half a second to decide to run for state legislature. I mean, it took me a while to figure out that I was willing to run for council. Let me go back for a second. You said your dad made you stand out and work a poll for somebody running for governor. Who was that?
Nat Winston.
Nat Winston. Okay. That goes back a long, long time.
That goes back a long way. Of course, I am old now, and I was 12 then.
Yeah. So. Okay. I got it. Well, so you've been around politics a long time. When did you run for the state legislative seat? What year?
2013.
Oh. All right. So things had started to change about that in terms of the legislature. And I don't remember I'm guessing, I'm thinking back, but I think at that point the legislature had switched from Democratic control to Republican. Is that right?
Absolutely. Beth Harwell was the speaker.
Okay. So tell me, so a lot of the questions that came in over the week were dealing with how does a member of the Democratic Party, particularly now in a super majority controlled legislature, how does that work? How do you get stuff done? And how, I know sometimes it can be difficult, but is it difficult all the time? Or, particularly with you, who is such a fun loving person, do you get along? I mean, is it as bad, or are there ways to make it worthwhile?
Well, what I tell everyone is that you look for like-minded individuals. For example, one of my bills last year was a constituent brought to me that if they had to have 2 EpiPens, they had such a peanut allergy that they had to have 2 EpiPens at all times. Well, if it was like a weekend or a holiday and their doctor's office was closed and they used one of those EpiPens or both of those EpiPens and their prescription was expired, they couldn't get another EpiPen. And that was a matter of life and death for them. And as I learned, so many other people. So I brought a bill that would allow the druggist, if you had a standing prescription for an EpiPen, for the druggist to be able to allow to, prescribe you or give you an EpiPen instead of having to wait until the end of the weekend or the end of the holiday or whatever the situation was to get a hold of your doctor's office. And you would be shocked at how many people, their granddaughters or themselves or their daughters all have these, allergies and need EpiPens. So, you look for like-minded people who were concerned about people's health, and it was going right through. And then TennCare put a huge fiscal note on it. Huge. I'm going to have to work on that next year. And I didn't have time to work on it because in my mind, you're going to get that EpiPen if you get it on Sunday or you wait and get it on Monday or Tuesday. It's not like I don't see why. Well, I do know why. They thought it was like Narcan, but Narcan's totally different when they said that Narcan could be given without a prescription. But it's the reason I was able to pass that bill on through until I got to budget was because of people who said, I've got an aunt that has to carry an EpiPen. I have, so you look for people with like-minded ideas. For example, when we had the Titans legislation up this last year, you'd be shocked at how many people love the Titans, and like I do. And so, I was able to go to a lot of different legislators on both sides of the aisles who like the Titans, and that helped us pass that legislation right on through. So it was a good thing.
Well, let me ask you this, because I spent many, many years, as you know, up at the legislature, and I'd worked for Speaker of the House, Jimmy Nafee. And at that point, it was a Democratic control. But part of what I always thought was my responsibility in working for him, but also working with other departments and so forth, was to get along with people, to understand that everybody brings their own set of values and issues to the legislature. And even if I didn't necessarily agree with them, I worked to get along. You found those common, the commonalities between you and other people, and you worked on that.
That's right.
But I also knew that back then there was a lot more people would go out to dinner together, they'd hang out together, and that made for a much easier way of kind of dealing with some of the more difficult issues. Do you find that still going on, or is it tougher than that now and you really have to work at it?
It's a lot tougher than that now. For example, when you were there, they had what they call committee dinners, where a lobbyist would pay for all the committee to go out to dinner together. Of course, that's against our ethics now. So the camaraderie is not there like it was, for example, when you were there with NAFI. You don't, we have we have receptions, but there's a difference between going to a reception with 200 or 300 people and sitting down to dinner, breaking bread with 20 who you serve on a committee with. Big difference. But we don't have that adhesiveness that you had, but we still try to build bridges. For example, I just thought about this. Politically, one of the furthest people from me was Terry Lynn Weaver, but she sat right behind me in the legislature for the last 4 years, and we got to be pretty good friends just because of being near each other, and we were able to work on her to sway her to see the true problems with education, with vouchers, and with other with TISA and other things. And she voted for what we believe is for the children and for public schools. And as you know, they came after her this year, and I don't know if you ever saw any of the mailers that they put out, but they were horrible. They were horrible against her, and they beat her just over school choice.
So, I mean, how do you understanding that? And I mean, and now we're digging deep into all the political stuff. What we encourage, from my background, what we encourage is people working together and understanding, being willing as an elected official to look at all sides, and then to eventually choose and come down on a position where, after a lot of thought, this is where I am. It seems like in this day and age, it's very hard to do that. And it's very hard to get off the political lines and just throw those aside and say, okay, what's best for everybody? And then you take a situation like Representative Weaver, who a very, very nice person, who decided to shift and then gets hammered over the head, and then loses that seat. How do you, with that going on, how do you convince people that you do have to stand up? I mean, you can look at Representative Cheney out from Wyoming, who knew she was going to get beaten over the head over an issue, but chose to stand up, and then loses. I think, and maybe I'm just asking, are there more politicians out there who are willing to start heading towards that path of talking to each other and trying to determine what is they think the right answer, and they're willing to stand up and they're willing to get beat for it?
I believe that there are, but just like they used Deborah Maggart, I think that was why you were still there. Mm-hmm. Deborah Maggart stood up against the NRA, and then against guns and cars, and then it migrated from the trunk to the passenger area. So it's been, law enforcement's been against it. It's been a horrible thing for preventing crime, allowing, because if you're a felon and somebody in the car who's not a felon says, oh, that's my gun. It's just, as you've talked to our police and our first responders, what a horrible thing this has become. But anyway, she stood up to it, and she said no to guns and trucks. And of course she was, private property rights too. There was just a myriad of things, the reason she did. And they took her to task, and they beat her in the following election. And that sent a chilling effect against people stepping outside and, like you say, being their own person, like Liz Cheney did. And it takes a lot of courage to be willing to step outside and do the right thing, especially when there's so much money involved and so much power involved. on certain issues, and it's really admirable when you see that. And Bob Ramsey's another one.
Right.
The school choice people just obliterated in this last election, told lies, and it was just again a horrible, nasty election against a really good man.
I know Representative Ramsey, great guy. I mean, you're talking about it's okay to actually like people on the other side. They're really good people. You may not necessarily agree with them, but they're nice people. And they're getting beat up just like everybody else. So let me ask you this. I mean, have you seen anybody, well, let's take, you mentioned the gun situation. And I mean, the concern in this country is it's just getting worse. There are more people buying guns, there's more violence, blah, blah, blah. Do you feel like there's any room to actually sit down and actually look at the information that's out there and listen to local police officers and everybody else and say, maybe we need to relook at some of these positions, because our ultimate job is to protect the safety of our constituents. Do you see any movement? Is there any talk, or is it just still stuck?
It's stuck, and it's stuck in Tennessee. And, for example, with guns in cars and permitless carry, and people, I think one of the biggest tragedies of guns in cars, there's so many, but people leaving their doggone guns in the car overnight. And that's the reason we're having all these car thefts. They're after the guns. And you can talk to anybody in law enforcement, they'll tell you that. Well, I talked to someone in leadership, and they said they didn't believe those statistics. They didn't believe that many guns were actually stolen, and that the people who are captured, or not captured, but who are arrested, are saying that they were stolen guns when they were somebody else's guns. It's all this convoluted stuff that you can't argue about. I mean, you can't tell. They don't believe the statistics. So if you don't believe the statistics, Jim, how are you going to want to change?
Well, I don't think you can. So the question is, I mean, obviously right now we're living in a country where stuff seems to be made up quite a bit. And I'm not saying that's a Republican Democratic thing. It's like lots of people make stuff up. And then you're looking at statistical information that you're getting through what you hope is a trustworthy source, and people just push it off and don't acknowledge it. And I don't know. Obviously that bothers me, because you're fighting against information that is sitting right in front of you, and people are just saying, well, that's just not true.
That's just not true. That's not how it works.
Yeah. Switch over to education. A lot of questions about education. And, I didn't ask you, which committees are you on in the State House?
I am now on criminal justice.
Yeah.
I'm on what state and local. No,
okay.
Well, it's called state. There's no, the local is divided off now. I'm sorry. And the subcommittees for criminal and for called department and agencies, which is a subcommittee of state.
Okay.
And then I'm on the ethics committee.
Okay. All right. So a lot of questions about education, which is going to have an impact overall on the state. And this last year was a big deal for education in terms of what the governor was pushing, and a lot more money, like $1 billion coming into the educational system. I think it comes in next year. Is that right?
Next year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the process that went through. And then there are a lot of people in Nashville who feel like we didn't get our proper share. Kind of explain that.
Are you talking about the process for TISA, or which process are you talking
Yeah,
about?
the process for getting the new TISA process, the new budgetary aspects laid out. And then I know Nashville was pushing really hard to get some additional funding. It didn't get a lot.
Did not.
Yeah. So kind of explain that whole process.
Okay. First of all, I want to start the process by saying Nashville generates a third of all sales tax for the great state of Tennessee. Think of that. 1 out of 95 counties generates a third of all the sales tax for this great state. So we are educating children in Sequatchie County, in Granger County, and Hardin County. We are educating, Nashville is educating children across this state. We're a sales tax driven income state. So we're the economic driver for that. Unfortunately, the suit by the small school systems said that the setup for the way that money was divided previously was, if you had a Walmart in your county or in your city, you received more tax money than a poor county that didn't have tax money. And so they came up with the BEP, and the BEP supposedly took all those into consideration. And, it really hurt us. But you know who even hurt worse in Davidson County, don't you? Sevier County.
Okay. Because they have a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Tourism. That's exactly right. So we were the two counties that were hurt the most through the BEP formula, and now TISA. Now they gave Sevier County a fix in TISA. They did not give it to Davidson County. I know you're shocked. I'm glad you're sitting down.
Who said I was sitting down?
Because we did not get a fix in TISA. We got a few extra million, but it was not enough to, even keep up with inflation, basically. So, we pled with the governor and the commissioner, because we had, so many ESLs, so many special needs, so we have a very challenging school system, and they chose instead to say, if you have a large area for your school system, they're going to give you more money, but they're not going to give you more money if you're a populous county like ours. But if you have to drive an extra couple of miles to pick up a student on a school bus, we're going to give you a lot more money. Don't really know how that all worked, but who really is getting more funds are the rural school systems in TISA. And it was interesting when the governor in his State of the State last year, or this year, but last session, announced the $1 billion in new funding. He said that if he put that out there as a carrot, in other words, if TISA passes, we're going to get that extra $1 billion. He could have put that extra $1 billion in now, and he chose not to. It was a carrot for TISA. And we're still underfunded, way underfunded compared to even Alabama funds more than we do per student. So we still, that $1 billion was a great, kickoff, but we've still got a lot of work to do.
Okay, so have kind of understanding TISA is the new money that's coming in, and understanding that most counties got more money. We got some additional money, but not nearly enough for the number of students that we have. How do we proceed to kind of keep an eye on it, and then fight for our share? And I know, I mean, some people get into this things like, well, okay, money's not the answer to the whole thing, and I think we know that. But money does provide resources to the classrooms and provides help for teachers and more stuff, whether it's books or computers or whatever for the kids. We want our kids to succeed, and part of this is about just making sure that the resources are there to make sure that that can happen. Okay, so where do we go from here? Knowing what we have right now, how do we keep fighting to make sure that we're accounted for as well?
Well, we've got a very strong Davidson County delegation. And of course, Shelby County, they got a little bit more money than we did. They didn't get a great deal more, but they got more money. Their delegation was split on TISA. Some of them were supportive of it, some of them were against it. But the Davidson County delegation was strictly against it. It was not good for our county at all. What we have to do as a delegation is to continue. We've got several, key members on education and the budget, and we're going to have to just keep pitching to get them to help us, so that the burden isn't totally on our property taxpayers, to help fund our students and help fund our school system. And you hit the nail on the head when you said money doesn't solve everything, but it helps us to retain teachers. That's all about teacher pay. It helps us to make sure that our children have the proper supplies, which you referred to. I mean, money isn't everything, but it sure means a lot.
All right, so let's dig a little deeper into the concern that obviously, people listening, factually true that we have supermajorities in both Senate and the House. So it's hard to be heard sometimes, as particularly the Democrats from Nashville. But I respect you all and know that you try to push really, really hard. So take it a little step further. Obviously, there has been a lot of stuff floating around in the paper recently about the fact that the council voted down the initial first reading of the ordinance to bring the Republican National Convention here. And there's a lot that we can go into about that. But there was talk in the paper about, well, now they're going to really take it out on us. The legislature going to do that. There's a lot behind it that people may never fully understand in terms of a lot of the decision making that went in by the council to figure that one out, and a lot of things that happened, a lot of things that didn't happen. But and I know sometimes the rhetoric is bad between the two bodies, but there's a benefit for Nashville, as you said, with all the revenues that we provide for the state, to keep it functioning really, really well. How do we mend those differences to make sure that in many ways we should be all on the same page in terms of making sure that Nashville has the ability to properly grow to benefit the state?
That's it. Excellent point, Jim. They don't want to kill the golden goose. And I keep reminding them of that. I had a discussion this past week with one of the leaders on the other side of the aisle. And I was told that, and from an outside perspective, I haven't been on the inside of this, obviously, but from an outside perspective, it looked like the convention was never coming to Nashville in the first place, that Milwaukee was always going to be, because of the political ramifications, was going to be the number one choice. But I was told from leadership on the other side that Nashville was a lock, that they were coming here, and that the councils and the administration's view of the RNC coming here was the reason that they didn't come. So they are laying it at your feet. I hate to tell you.
I'm sitting down. I think I knew that. Yeah.
And I mean, but to me, they weren't coming anyway, so it was a mood issue. But and you know, they don't feel that way in state leadership. So they're coming after us now. How much they're going to come after us? I've been asking that they don't, you know, that they don't come after us, but they are cognizant of the economic drivers, and they said they're not going to hurt our even though they thought it was a bad business decision on our part, they're not going to hurt our tourism or our convention business or anything like that. But they are coming after us. I don't know what all that means. I don't know how they're going to come after us. I mean, you know, it's not like they can cut our school funding that much. So I don't know how they're going to come after us, but they say they're coming after us.
Well, you know, politics can be difficult and nasty at some point. I try to be optimistic in the sense that I would look at this. I kind of thought it was going to happen before, but look at this as a way to maybe start opening discussions back up between the city council and the legislature. I know you guys have a lot more power than we do. If you were paying attention during civics and not sitting in the back row socializing, but
we are the big brother.
Yeah, you have much more power than we do. The feds have more power than you guys have.
Right.
So it's sort of like a chain of process. We know, but I think besides the fact that, you know, obviously we know who our Davidson County delegation is, I think we could probably do a much better job of trying to initiate some conversations with the leadership in the House and the Senate to talk about, you know, things that are beneficial not only to Nashville, but are very beneficial to the state as well. And there was a conversation I had with Speaker of the House Sexton, who I know, and you know, I think we can start those conversations. If we get beat up, we get beat up. But I'd rather talk and at least have an understanding of what we're trying to convey than not talk and just simply get beat up anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing to do. I mean, you know, I understand the security concerns. You know, we would have to bump out other conventions. I understand the position of Nashville, but you know, I don't know that if they do, they don't act like they understand the position of Nashville, other than it was purely political.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going into it. I think I never could figure out exactly, particularly because Tennessee at this point is not really a swing state, that Wisconsin is a swing state. Milwaukee had already approved their contracts. They also had hosted the 2020 Democratic National Convention, even though it went virtual because of the pandemic. So they had a plan. They had a safety plan. They had hotels available, even though they were going to have to bus people sometimes to Chicago. And they had figured out a way to say, even with a kind of a Democratic controlled city council in Milwaukee, they figured out a way to do it. We weren't there. And and I had some discussions with the council president in Milwaukee, and I actually called him the night that the city council voted down that on first reading, and just said, I'm just letting you know what we did. Very, very nice guy, and kind of understood the situation that we were going through. Again, much easier to talk to people on the front end and have conversations. And even if they don't necessarily go in a direction that you want it to, I'd rather call these people, at least colleagues, and talk to them instead of never talk to them. So we're going to see if we can work through that, and we'll probably be in touch with you guys up on the Hill about setting some of that stuff up. Other stuff that's going on, I know, I love the story about you and Representative Weaver. I mean, that just happens because of the way you sit and talk. And again, Representative Weaver brought in her own set of values, and she also is a very good singer, as you probably know.
She is. She always dismissed us on Easter with her song.
Oh, I didn't know that, but I know that she's a very good singer. But what else do you all try to do up there, particularly in the Davidson County delegation? Memphis would be similar to us. I assume that you work with them. Chattanooga and Knoxville, the big 4 cities. But particularly folks from the rural areas, have a different set of things that they're looking for. What other efforts are going on that you can tell us about to really get to know each other and to at least start that dialogue of saying, we're not so different?
Well, different members have different strengths with other members. In other words, one of the Davidson County delegation members had a very strong bond with the far right people from East Tennessee, for upper East Tennessee. And that member would communicate with those members and sometimes bring them over to particular things that we were trying to kill, that the rest of the state was of the other side of the aisle was for. So we really have certain members who have relationships with other members, and we try to work that a lot. And when we get together as a caucus, either the state Democratic caucus or the Davidson County caucus, we talk about who's going to speak with what member on the other side of the aisle, who has a relationship with those members, especially during committee time, because people don't realize what we're able to stop in committees. You know how the system works. The real power in the state is, I know it's not that way at Metro, but in the state, the committees are where everything starts and stops. And we delegate to who's on that committee, who has relationships on that committee, because if we can stop it in committee, if it gets to the floor, it's probably got a 95, 94% chance of passage. So the real work of ours goes on in our committees.
Well, what's interesting, Representative, is that so I came from that type of process, obviously understanding the state legislature, and then I come down to the council, and our committee structure is not very strong. We kind of move bills through committees, and even if a bill gets voted down in a committee, it still comes to the floor for discussion. And so you can't, there's only one way, and people may not know this, there is a way that some of us helped stick into our rules several years ago about trying to stop really bad pieces of legislation, at least that people basically thought were bad pieces of legislation, in the committee. And that is when a member defers to move a bill, to defer it indefinitely over the wishes of the sponsor. And if they can do that with a certain number of votes, the bill doesn't come to the floor. It's the only process we've got where we can actually kill legislation in a committee. And some people may think that's not fair. It's only been used, I think, 3 or 4 times. It doesn't get used very often. And even then, we have an outlet which says that you can still file the bill and then have a vote on it on the floor to put it back in the committee structure. And if the council wants to hear it, that's fine. But I know that if you're going to take the time, like you're talking about, for a committee to meet and really take the time to study a piece of legislation, that's where you can really have a lot of input and a lot of say in terms of whether a bill should move on or not. We just don't have it at the council. Maybe one day we will. So I guess what I'm doing is saying that I do appreciate the state legislative process. I think you I think yours is pretty strong.
The committee system is very strong at the state. And, there's been very few things. Now, there has been, for example, vouchers. Vouchers would have been normally killed in committee. But Glenn Cassida, who we all saw in the news this week, he would come into the education committee or the budget committee or whatever committee that had to get out of and strong arm his members to vote for that. And that's how it made it to the floor. And then once it got to the floor, he had to strong arm to get that one extra vote to pass it. So it was really, that's the only time I've seen well, he was a very hands-on speaker, unlike Beth Harwell. Beth Harwell would talk to her members, but she would not strong arm. I never saw her come into a committee to make sure that something was passed. Cassida was the first speaker that I've been under that actually lorded over his members. And it was very interesting and very intimidating on his part, much to his demise, thank goodness. But it was one of the reasons that he created so many enemies, because he really, I think he's the only speaker that I can think of that would have been able to get through vouchers. It was a lot of disagreement on vouchers on both sides of the aisle. And of course, what did we have? 29 people sign up for vouchers for this fall. So I think it was just a talking point at this for the administration at this point. But you can't ever, once you open that door, you never know what can happen from here on out, and the door is open.
So we only have a few more minutes, and I want to recognize Councilmember Tanya Hancock is on the call and has been, and I'm sure she's just taking notes on everything that you're saying, and and then we'll bring it to the council meeting and share with everyone what you've said.
We're very proud to have her as one of our council people in 37115.
I know you are. I don't. Well, okay. So a question from all that, for people who have been up on Capitol Hill and have, she's saying extraordinary notes, so that's good. So for people who generally don't pay a full amount of attention to the state legislature, what's the best way to figure out how it all works? The same thing goes for the council. We have people that follow the council and can figure out what's going on. How do people understand this process? Because, many people might not have known that the Speaker of the House actually has a vote on all the committees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the vice mayor doesn't have a vote on any of the committees. I just picked the chairs and the committee assignments, but I can't walk into a committee and break a tie at a committee level, but the Speaker of the House can.
Absolutely.
So how do people figure out how all that stuff works? Do they have to come down and kind of pay attention to a particular bill and just understand? It's pretty difficult sometimes.
It is difficult. Number one, get a blue book. If you don't have a blue book, call my office and we'll be happy to send you one. 615-741-3229. It's free of charge. Tells you all about the state, who are the players. And then once you know who the players are and the committees that they hold, then you'll see the power structure in the state evolve. And of course, the state, one thing that we do in the legislatures, we have, like you with Channel 3, we have an amazing audio visual system that everything's recorded on, and you can track a bill through the General Assembly website from beginning to end. You can watch the video of the discussion on that bill. You can watch committee hearings live. You can watch House floor debate live. You can from your own home, you can watch absolutely how a bill evolves. And if you miss it, you can go back and watch the discussion on the audio visual. So it's really an amazing, we really do a good job of that. And there's a lot of transparency, and people don't realize, Jim, what all the state, everybody knows that you're in charge of their potholes, and you're in charge of the education, Davis County, and the council runs everything here, but they don't understand that a lot of it, we control who gets a driver's license, we control how long you're going to spend in prison, we control how much money you're going to get in court, we control if you're going to get a beautician's license, we control such a huge part of people's daily lives, and they they don't get involved a lot of times, and don't follow what all goes into the legislature. And I just encourage everyone, it's such a huge part of your life, and please get involved and follow it. I know, Jim, when NAFI was there, they tell me years ago, nobody from the public showed up. And the legislature kind of operated in a bubble. More and more, the public's getting involved, and a lot of it's over outrage of what's been going on in the legislature, which I understand. Whatever it takes, I hate to become more meaningful of a body just out of outrage, but we want more people to be involved in our legislature throughout the state.
Well, I think your comment about years ago, for a long time, I don't think the public fully knew what was going on. I think what I would say for Speaker Nacy is that there were efforts being made at that point to try to figure out better ways to communicate that information out through different things. I remember he started a press conference on Thursday after session where he invited all the press corps in, and he was giving out information to try to get it out to people so people could know to come and be a part of the process. So it's been a long time in coming, but I'm glad people are even getting even more involved in the things that go on. It's very, very important. We have about a minute. Here's my last question for you. Just quickly, some interesting story that you would convey, something that's happened up there that is just kind of fun that you would want to tell us. And it doesn't have to involve you, but it probably will.
So many. I mean, there's so many stories, but I tell you what I'm just most proud of is being able to help people. For example, when the pandemic hit and nobody could get their unemployment, we helped more people in our district get their unemployment, which was so satisfying and such a wonderful thing to do. Being in public life, that helping people is the most important thing that you can do day in and day out. And taking bills. I had one lady come to me who had a daycare, an adult daycare, and she couldn't reach the number, which was like 9 or 10 or 12, somewhere around in there, to keep open according to the state licensure. Yeah. And I went to Department of Human Services, and I said, where did you come up with this number? They said, well, they didn't know where they came up with that number. So she came down and testified, and we passed a bill to lower that number to 6, so she could stay in business. It's just, that to me is so fulfilling and so much fun that's how government should work. So I'm not sure how fun of a story that is, but it was fun to me. Well,
we may have you back on at some point, and then it'll all be about stories that I assume you've got. and we'll go from there. Bill, thank you for being the guest on the show. You've been great. A lot of really, really good information, a lot of good positive comments. Bill Beck, 51st District State Representative. Keep up the good work. And next week,
let me describe my district, Jim, very quickly.
Okay, describe your district.
The 51st District is all of downtown, Germantown, the Gulch. Got on my new redistricting, I go out west end to the Split, and then I come out East Nashville. I have most of East Nashville, and then I turn and go up to Inglewood, Madison, most of Madison. And now I have parts of Donaldson on the other side of Briley Parkway all the way to Spence Lane. So it's a very exciting and district, and I cross many council lines, and I always try to work with my council people.
Good for you. That's a very good thing. All right. Thank you for picking up on that last question. Bill Beck, thank you for being a guest. We will not be on next week because it's Labor Day weekend. So we'll take the week off. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Bill, enjoy the weekend.
Thanks,
Okay?
Jim.
It's beautiful. Thanks everybody for joining in. Have a great weekend. Have a safe week next week. Thanks everybody.